This has to be one of the most requested things in terms of how do you make this out of concrete? We're making a bowl and we're going to be using white concrete. White concrete made from white cement and a white aggregate, in this case white silica sand, or mostly white silica sand, is going to produce a finished product which is largely white. This is similar to something that you might find in a swimming pool. And it really, how white will this finished product be is going to come down to the aggregate that you choose. Now, this product here, I've chosen this for a specific application. This is white lightning, and you might recognize this perhaps as something that you would use for sandblasting purposes. It's exactly what it is. And the reason why we're using it is because it is available almost everywhere and it is very inexpensive. So these things are great for making a mortar product. The cement that we're using is just simply white cement. So the cement is a little bit more white than the sand in this case. The sand does have a gray tone to it, and you can get better sand. By all means, get better sand. I wanted to offer a sand that is widely available, something that pretty much everyone can get their hands on, and it's mostly white. Like, pay your kids a nickel for every little pepper flake that they pull out of there. Boom, white sand, everybody wins. So in this case, what we're going to be doing, making this white bowl, we're going to be using 2 parts sand to 1 part cement. And the reason why we're doing that is this sand is pretty coarse. It looks pretty fine, but it's not in comparison to other sands that you might use, like brick sand. And when we make this mix, it's going to be a little bit less of a fine detail mix than commonly you would find for casting applications. And the higher we go with the cement content, the higher the cement ratio, the more fine detail we're going to be able to capture. You could do 1-to-1. It would give you a great, fantastic finished product. It would just be expensive, right? Because the white cement component is expensive. White cement is basically double the cost of the regular gray stuff that you might find at the hardware store. It's usually more about finding white cement available than it is about being willing to pay double for the bag. Because at 90 pounds a bag, you can make a lot of stuff with 90 pounds. A lot. And the same with the sand. In this case, it was I can't remember. It was for sure under $20 a bag. Geez, maybe even $10 a bag. And those bags are 50 pounds. So, it's definitely expensive as a mix versus just regular sand and cement where you pay $30 for a yard of sand, like tons of sand. Bags of cement, the regular gray stuff is pretty affordable. It's hard to get more affordable. So when we are dealing with the white sand and white cement, you are mindful of the fact that this is more expensive. That being said, white sand and white cement can produce some pretty dramatic effects on their own. Plus, this is the ideal platform to start from if you want to do any kind of integral coloring, tinting, painting, anything like that, because a white cement is going to obviously accept coloration a lot easier, a lot better, a lot more dramatic colors than what gray cement would be. Gray cement is notorious for being gray and staying gray. It's very hard to color. It takes a lot of coloration or pigment in order to change gray cement. White cement, not at all the case. You're able to get much better results if you're looking to have more interesting, more vivid coloration. In this case, we're going to be making a white bowl. 2 parts sand, 1 part cement. Going to mix it to a fairly wet consistency such that we should be able to vibrate out most of the air bubbles that are going to be here. Let's talk about the mold for a second here. All we have simply is an outside mold, an inside mold. It really doesn't get easier than that. In both cases, I have a hole drilled in the bowl. So we'll talk about this one first. For the inside mold, as I press this in, because the shape profile of this, you'll get an air bubble trapped here. And by having a hole, when I set this in, I allow the air to escape into the inside mold. Yes, some concrete product will come with it, but that's easily removed after the fact. And then I'll end up with a better inside finished detail because I won't have bubbles to the same degree that I would were there no hole located here. This hole is more for the demolding process. When you pour concrete into a mold, it will vacuum seal itself in there. And this is not porous, so it's not going to allow air in, and that finished product is going to be suctioned in here and it's not going to want to come out. So that little hole gets filled with Play-Doh or modeling clay, and that's what you have there right now. Little hole filled with Play-Doh or modeling clay. And that will make it so that my product's not leaking out the bottom, but when the time comes to demold this, I can just take the head of a nail or something and scratch that little bit of Play-Doh out of there. And then usually that's enough to demold on its own. Just kind of let it fall, and the weight of the piece itself is enough to drag it out of there, since you have alleviated the vacuum concern that we're dealing with in a worst case scenario. Or in a mold that just will not come apart, you can also use this hole to apply pressurized air. If you apply pressurized air carefully, you can usually demold pretty much anything doing that. So this is what we have here. Now you'll notice that these bowls are well used. They certainly are. That's important because, let's see, let me find a good example here. Okay, it's like tiny, but take a look right here in this corner. You see that tiny little speck of whatever that is there, leftover concrete residual? Take your best, oldest sock that your favorite dog chewed a hole in, and really, so every single imperfection that you see there is going to be visible in the finished product. That's so important. If you wanted to, you could just use a brand new bowl every time that you cast one of these. But that would be crazy. That would be like a new dollar every time you wanted to pour a new bowl. Who has that kind of money? That's why I reuse my bowls. But if you want to have a perfect finished product, yes, if you use new products each and every time, you're going to get a much more high quality finish on it. This is for my garden. I'm not really worried about high quality finished detail. Like, I want it to be a good, nice quality finished detail. But if it has the tiniest speck or abrasion in there, I'm not worried about that in the slightest. But if you are, just use new products every time and you won't have that problem. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to apply our mix in here. We're going to set this inside. I'm going to have to add some weight to this so as to make it neutrally buoyant here, because I don't want it to just if I push it in, it'll just lift out like a boat. And so I'm going to have to add some sand usually to give it some weight here. That way I can set it where I want and it'll stay there while it hardens. I usually give it about 24 hours on average before I demold these. It's a fairly thick piece. Finished dimensions are like an inch thick, so it's pretty strong, and I don't mind demolding it after 24 hours because it's usually ready to go. Let's talk about mold release. You could, using a brand new piece of plastic, go ahead and pour concrete into it. Probably not gonna have a lot of problem getting that concrete back out. But it's always an advantage to you to make sure that your mold or your form is wanting to release. And by that I mean there shouldn't be any tack or residual stickiness or anything like that. If you want to make sure that it demolds as cleanly and as easily as possible, I want to apply a mold release of some kind. There are a lot of commercially available products. That's probably one of the number one there. It's just really expensive stuff. So I save that usually for situations in which I'm worried about demolding, or like on my urethane molds, which urethane molds are really expensive to make. So I really want to take care of them. So I use a product like that. On this bowl, which I don't care about, I'm not really too worried about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some cooking oil here. And that's just whatever brand cooking oil, nothing fancy. And just use like a whisper, like the smallest amount you can pour out. And basically take it all off. Like push it around a little bit and then just take it all off. You really don't want to leave a thick layer of oil at all. That's not the idea here. This is kind of like if you had oily fingers from eating Kentucky Fried Chicken and you had to wash them only using cold water. Like at the end, you could feel it, right? Like that's what I want this to be like. I want it to be clean, but you can feel that there's a film there. That's what we're going for. All right, it's not perfect. Maybe yours is perfect and brand new. Mine's used. It's a little beat up, but it looks pretty good, and I'm happy with that. So the same thing here. I have to make sure that I grease this outside here. I think I'm just going to give it just a tiny bit more, like just a couple of dots. Okay, so basically I think we're ready to mix here. I'm going to have to add some weight to this, but I don't want to put some sand in yet because I need that air pocket to get out of there first. So I'm going to grab something to allow me to add weight that isn't sand. Which one of you? You're heavy. Right there. Problem solved. Moving along. Okay, so I'm going to make this mix now. Again, it's going to be a little on the wet side, ideally. Pour it in here, and then we'll talk a little bit about consolidation once we get that far. All right, let's take a look. Well, that's exactly what we were going for. It's a little bit on the wet side. Looks really good, actually. So I'm probably going to need more weight than that. I guess I could just add another one. Which one's another heavy one? Yeah, he'll do. Let's start there, see how that is. It might be too much, but we'll see. So that looks pretty good there. Now it's really important that you vibrate these. I mean, you could tap it like manually, use a mallet or hand, even something to that effect. Like basically just, doing something like that. Like if I want this inside mold to move that way, I can't just push it because it pushes back. It doesn't want to go. So I push it that way as you're tapping. And then that's going to get that stuff out of your way. So I still need a little more weight in here, as you can see, and that's what this guy's for. But at first, before I kind of finish it off, I want to spend some time vibrating the sides here. This is my narwhal, which I have constructed. You could just use any kind of palm sander, I suppose. You have a pencil vibrator attachment here, or you just like the most effective thing is just vibrating the entire thing. And you can watch as you're going the air bubbles rising to the surface, and that's exactly what we want. The more air that rises to the surface, the less that is trapped in here, creating voids or honeycombing the finished product. Because this is a wet mix already, when you vibrate or trowel, you raise water to the surface, and that's why you can hopefully see, it's not too far away, but there's a lot of water on the surface layer here. And I expect to have something like that with what I'm doing here. When you make a concrete mix this wet and then you vibrate it that long, you're going to raise a lot of water. So what I expect when I make a bowl like this, in my finished product, this very top layer, it might even look okay, but it's not. It's compromised. It's too wet. The concrete is too hydrated there, and as a result, it's weak. And even if it looked good, it would fail prematurely or perhaps right away. So when I finish this, what I would expect to do is sand, grind, or otherwise expose this top layer all the way around on my bowl. And normally I'm pretty happy with that. So I mean, come back and with the follow-up video here once this is sat and cured. Like I said, I'm going to give it 1 to 2 days to cure before I try to remove it from the mold. And then past that, I would wait, probably another 3 weeks. So a month total before I try to put any kind of finish in terms of like sanding or grinding. If you want to sand or grind like a top layer here to give it a nice finish, it needs to be cured. The cement component needs to be hard. If you try to do that too soon, what will happen is the cement is still weak, and we want to shear the grains of sand off as we sand or file it down. But instead what happens is that the cement's just too weak and it lets go of the sand grain, and now you have pitting in that area where you were trying to sand it smooth. So don't sand or grind too soon, but we will want to sand or grind this top layer of the bowl here to expose a more solid concrete or cement product underneath of it, as opposed to this really hydrated top layer. But hopefully all that vibration gave us something pretty good in terms of a finished quality product with minimal voids or honeycombing. So I'm going to demold this white concrete or white cement and white sand aggregate bowl here. It's only 12 or 15 hours old, but it is definitely set up. It's pretty hard. I normally don't have too much. I normally don't have too much trouble demolding these. I hope I'm not cursing myself here. Break the mold free at the edges. I have a hole in the middle of this, if you saw the first half of this video, and it allows some of the mortar mixture to flow into this interior bowl. And I do that so that we don't end up with as many air pockets trapped there. So there is a little plug of mortar right here I can feel, and that's gonna have to break off in order to get this top bowl out. But it should, yeah, it's just connected by that little dot. So let's see how this one turned out. Oh my, that didn't work. Did not work at all. Way too many air bubbles. So I would definitely want to parge this inside layer if I'm going to have any sort of, if this is going to be visible as a finished product, I would definitely want to parge a layer in there. And I would use 1 part white sand, 1 part white cement, mixed with water to a wet cake batter-like consistency. And then I would just paste that in with a paintbrush even would be pretty much ideal. And that would help to get that inside finish looking a little better. Now I'm hopeful that the outside looks a little bit better than that, because that's what I'm worried about, is the outside, because that's what's going to be visible. Should be able to just get this out of here. Oh, it's beautiful. Forget that other part about the inside with the bubbles. Just look at the outside. Please draw your attention to the outside of the bowl. It's like darn near flawless here. Remember, this is a salt and pepper look with this white lightning sand product, where it's mostly white, but some, pepper looking granules in there. Oh boy, does that ever look good. I'm super happy with that. Less happy with that. Nothing to see here. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye. Go away. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Okay. Getting back to it here. I did mention at the end of the last video, this top layer had too much hydration, too much water, and I mean, you think, oh, that looks good, right? But it's really not. It's a little compromised, and at the very least, you want to take a rasp and you want to kind of take off that top layer, and you can hear it. It's not hard. I don't know how to describe it. It's not soft, but it doesn't feel like the sidewalk out front of your home. Like, you can hear it. It's harder. This has like a, I don't know. Really what it is it's partially this overhydrated product, and it's partially just cement that's not fully actuated yet. This is only 12 or 14 hours old. But since I do want to take off some of the height here, this is the perfect time. If you wait too long, this would just be too strong of a product, and you wouldn't be able to actually shave off any appreciable volume. You can use a grinder for this. A variable speed grinder would be better than a full speed angle grinder. You'd have to be very careful. The blade would be very aggressive for something as soft as this. And the tool which you would want to use would be called a diamond cup. A diamond cup would be just basically something very similar to this, but more of a heavy-duty version. This has different, grits on it. Even you could use something like this. But this is a polisher, and this diamond pad here would fill up with this stuff that I'm scraping off very readily, and I think it would just jam up and be largely ineffective, where a diamond cup, like if I had to do 100 of these, I'm not using a rasp for sure. I have 1 to do, and I'm using a rasp, but maybe you have 100 to do. And so you would buy, ideally, a variable speed grinder, a 4.5-inch diamond grinding cup, and then you would use that and, grind that outside edge, probably outside, unless you want everything in your life covered with a 1/4-inch layer of concrete dust, which you probably don't. So that's the process that I would use. Again, what I've got here is just something that's flat. That's more or less what I'm going for. And the idea, again, being this is only half a day old. You cannot get a good finish on this right now. It's not possible because the cement component is weak. When the cement component's weak, it will not hold the grains of sand. As I try to file the grain of sand smooth, it just releases the grain of sand, and now I have a pit where that grain of sand was. So that's why you can't get a really nice finish on this yet. I get this flat now, let it set up for another 2 or 3 weeks until this is really hard and it does feel like the sidewalk out front of your home. And then I can come back with something a lot less aggressive than a rasp or a file, like sandpaper, something like that. And you can actually start to step sand. You could entirely step sand from 50 grit up to 5,000 grit. Or you could just use like 100, 220 grit sandpaper and just get a reasonably nice finished detail on the top of your bowl here. But remember, with a bowl like this, it's really all about this. Look at that. I'm so impressed with how that looks. One of the best ones yet.